Sister Gail.
Pray for me. Well, I guess you know it's been 6 weeks since my heart surgery. So I'm going to sit down to preach. And this will be my first time to speak since undergoing heart surgery. Tomorrow evening, I think I'm supposed to speak at 6:30 tomorrow evening. It works for you? Okay. At least that's what I think it is. Anyway, tomorrow evening when I speak, or the next time I speak, I'm going to show you pictures of the aorta. So don't eat before you come. So anyway, I wanted you to know that. I thought I'd wait till then and share the operation and a few words about it. It's been a most unusual time and exciting for me to be able to come through surgery like that. And it is amazing to me how many friends I have met who've undergone the same thing. We live in a marvelous world today where instead of dying, people can keep on living. And I'll never forget watching the videotape of my friend evangelist Mickey Bonner as he preached to 3,000 people in Nashville, Tennessee about a year or so ago at the Bill Gothard Seminar conference there, and died in the pulpit while he was preaching. Heart attack. And so I'm going to sit down while I preach. But I believe that the Lord has spared me for His service. I asked the doctor, I said, how many people my age you see with this condition? He said, you're the first. I said, what do you mean? He said, what year were you born? I said, 1938. He said, well, I want you to know that every baby born in 1938 with your condition are all dead. He said, in 30 years, I've done 5,000 babies with your condition. But you're the first 62-year-old man with your condition. So the Lord's brought me through a marvelous life. I want to tell you about my new book, On the Eve of Adam. It's really a dissertation on Isaiah 46, where God says, I'm God. There is none else. I am God. There is none like me. Declaring the end from the beginning. And that's what the book's all about. How God, on the eve of Adam's creation, knew what He was going to do. And beginning there, God declared the great plan of the ages. He didn't wait until the days of Isaiah or the days of Calvary. From Adam, He declared the end from the beginning. That's what the book's about. I think you'll enjoy it. It's brand new. We just got 48 books out there from the printers today. It's on the book table. We'll get 12 more boxes tomorrow if you don't get yours today. But I hope you'll pick yours up today. I want to mention to you that we have a series of 12 lectures on revealing Revelation back there at the book table. And normally they are $49.95. They're on special for $30 for the 3 videos, 12 studies on the 22 chapters in the book of Revelation. And this is from the perspective of rabbinical studies. All of the various tools of interpretation that the rabbis have used down through the centuries, we apply to the book of Revelation. And it is a study in Revelation like you have never read or seen before. Then I want to remind you of our magazine. We have some free copies back there for you. And if you'd like to subscribe, all you have to do is spend $50 on the book table and get a year subscription free. Such a deal. I should change my name to Synagogue. I want to talk to you today about dragon power. And it is my opinion that the dragon is rising in Revelation 13. Verses 1 and 2 read, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard," which is the most unusual metaphor, a leopard. "And his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth is the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority," political authority. "I submit to you that the beast is rising." And it is my opinion that the catalyst upon which world government will rise within the next few years is the United Nations. Back in 1974, in April 1974, the United Nations issued a declaration on the establishment of a new international economic order. This is world government. And they've been planning it since 1974 and before. Last year, September 6th through 8th, in the year 2000, over 150 kings and queens and prime ministers, heads of states from around the world gathered at the United Nations to approve the Millennium Declaration, a move toward what they call global governance. That's just a buzzword for world government. Nothing short of world government. They want 4 new world orders. First, they want a world military, and they ask for that. Our military is already being turned over to the United Nations, and I'm sure you're aware of that. They want a world economy, and of course the NAFTA treaties and the GATT treaties are fast pushing the world toward a world economy. And you know, when our stock market sneezes, the rest of the world gets pneumonia, economic pneumonia. Then they want a world religion. And though they haven't said a lot about it, they've been having a lot of discussions with, everybody but the fundamentalist Christians. They haven't invited us. But the headquarters for the world religion is actually at the Presidio in San Francisco, where Mr. Gorbachev lives and has his headquarters, and he is putting together this world religion and world government. Can you imagine him, an atheist, putting together a world religion? And then, of course, the final step will be world government. One step at a time. And one of the first things they wanted to do was establish the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which sounds like a good idea, but of course, anybody in world political circles who wants to do anything has to dress it up with a nice dressing on the outside so people will be fooled into thinking that it's a good thing. The International Criminal Court is supposed to try rogue nations for crimes against humanity. That is not their real purpose. And we have heard recently that Milosevic of Yugoslavia is going to be tried for crimes against humanity. And Ariel Sharon, for example, is fixing to be tried in some European court for his involvement in the massacres at the Palestinian camps in Lebanon back several years ago, which, as far as I know, he had nothing to do with, but he's still going to be tried for it. And as long as these people stay in their own countries, they're pretty safe, but it sort of limits them. They can't travel outside their countries anymore. International Criminal Court, I'll be telling you more about that in a moment. Then, of course, they want a rapid deployment military. And finally, they want the ability to collect taxes from everybody in the world. As if we didn't pay enough taxes. Here's the Millennium Declaration that the 150 heads of state signed on to. We, heads of state and government, have a collective responsibility to uphold the principles of human dignity, equality, and equity at the global level. We reaffirm our commitment to the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, which have proved timeless and universal. Timeless since 1945, of course. And then they said, we believe that the central challenge we face today is to ensure that globalization becomes a positive force for all the world's people. Mark my word, folks, they're headed for world government. In our lifetime, in the foreseeable future. Now, if we're going to have a world government in the foreseeable future, how long do you suppose it'll be till Jesus comes? According to the Bible, world government is only supposed to last 3.5 years. The last half of the tribulation period. And they want world government right away? I think we are close to the second coming of Christ. The Club of Rome, back in 1974, issued a paper. And the United Nations has been following their guidelines ever since. These people published a plan to divide all nations into 10 political, economic regions. Does that sound familiar? Back then they called it 10 kingdoms, but the sense have changed it because the word kingdoms is a little too biblical. They want political, economic regions. And you can see them here on the screen. United Nations in Canada and Alaska, they're all number 1. Then Mexico and Central and South America is number 6. And Russia and her satellites are number 5. And Europe's number 2, and so on. 10 political, economic regions. Sounds like the 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but give their power to the beast for 1 hour. The beast is rising. Of course, if this is the revived Roman Empire, then they're going to need a Caesar, aren't they? Wonder who they're going to get. Well, this came out in Time magazine, so I just thought I'd throw it in just for kicks. In November a year ago, I met a pastor from one of the Balkan states, very close to the Yugoslavian conflict, Kosovo conflict, that our President Clinton got involved with during his latter days of his presidency. This pastor from the Balkan states came to Oklahoma City, sat in my office, and he told me that he had in his congregation an ex-KGB agent, now a Christian. In fact, he told me that this KGB agent had once arrested him and put him in prison. And now he's a Christian, and he is his pastor. And you cannot imagine the things that Christians and pastors go through in other countries. It's incredible. But here he has this ex-KGB agent in his congregation and confided in his pastor, who sat across from my desk, and told me that the G7, that is the 7 industrialized nations that have been meeting every year for 20 years or more, had already chosen who will be the rulers in the New World Order. And he said to me that Mikhail Gorbachev has been chosen to be the leader, the president of the New World Government, and that Margaret Thatcher is going to be a vice president. But he said to me, this was November of last year, there are going to be 2 vice presidents. The other vice president will be Mr. Bill Clinton. In case you're wondering why he moved to New York. Now, this was November a year ago. This pastor from one of the Balkan states, a country very close to Yugoslavia, once a Russian satellite nation. told me this. That's the first I'd heard of it. A president and 2 vice presidents of the world government. But you know, Mr. Bill Clinton on December 31st of the year 2000, just minutes before the turn of the new year, gave an executive order to sign the 1998 Rome Statute establishing the International Criminal Court. The ICC statute goes into effect, according to the documents, 60 days after it is ratified by the 60th nation. I'm not sure how many nations have ratified it. I'm not sure just when it's going into effect. But the United States ratified it, or at least signed on to the documents, last December 31st, just months away. The ICC is supposed to have 18 judges. They are so bold. 3 levels of the court. 6 judges in a pre-trial chamber, 6 judges in a trial chamber, and at least 4 judges. Now, you got to figure it out. 18 divided by 3 is 6. At least 4 judges. Let's go ahead and say 6 judges in the appeals chamber, plus the presidency. And the presidency, according to the ICC Rome Statute from 1998, is to have a president and 2 vice presidents. I didn't know that until November, but that was a full month before Bill Clinton let everybody know there was such a thing as the Rome Statute for the ICC. But now I want you to know that the conflict that is about to blow up in the Middle East is all over the Temple Mount. Jerusalem is the key. That's why this conference is called the Battle for Jerusalem. In fact, God said in Zechariah He's going to make Jerusalem a burdensome stone, you know. So here we have a book that I wrote back in nearly 20 years ago, in which I said there are 3 groups that want the Temple Mount. The first group, of course, is the Palestinians. They have present control of the Temple Mount, and they want to keep control of the Temple Mount. Yasser Arafat has been willing to spill the blood of over 500 Palestinians in the last year since the conflict started, all over the Temple Mount. And of course, Israel wants the Temple Mount. It's the site of their ancient temple, of course. But there's a third group that's really trying to pit these two against each other. The Palestinians and the Israelis are just pawns in a game, so that this third group can really take control and gain sovereignty over the Temple Mount. And they are the Knights Templar. Dating back 1,000 years to the days of the Crusades, when Hughes de Payens in 1118 established the Knights Templar. 9 men, mostly relatives and business associates from Europe, came to Jerusalem, to the palace of King Baldwin, and announced their new order called the Poor Knights of the Temple. The French term Knights Templar, the Temple Knights. They want control. Of course, the Crusader kingdom lasted, 200 years? Then the Muslims took over. And the Knights Templar have been trying ever since to get the Temple Mount back. And here's a newspaper, the Sunday Post from Glasgow, Scotland, back about a year ago, January 24th, in fact, of the year 2001, just 6 months or so ago, with the headlines, "Scot in Ritual Death Mystery." The name of this man whose picture you see on the screen is Alistair Roslin Sinclair. He is a direct descendant from Robert the Bruce, who built the Roslin Castle in Edinburgh, Scotland, who gave sanctuary to the Knights Templar when they were driven out of France in 1304 to 1307. This Knight Templar was in Israel some clandestine reason, when he tried to get out of the country, he was arrested by the Israeli police. And while he was in jail, he committed suicide. He hanged himself by his own shoestrings. That's what they said. But when his body got back to Scotland, which, by the way, was the same week the Bilderbergers were meeting in Edinburgh, he was a little bit unable to give his report to them, you understand. When his body got back there for burial, they found that the cartilages in his neck had been removed, so they could not prove whether he had hung himself with his own shoestrings. And his heart was missing, which is rather bizarre, don't you think? The story in this newspaper says Knights Templar linked to missing heart. Now this goes back to Robert the Bruce. When Robert the Bruce was dying, he asked that his heart be removed from his body, taken to Jerusalem and buried on the Temple Mount. So this became a Knight Templar ritual, that whenever some Knight Templar was killed in a war on a foreign shore, that his body might be buried there, but his heart would be sent back to England. In fact, you remember the missionary that was buried in Westminster Abbey from Africa. Who? David Livingstone, thank you. His heart was buried in Africa, but his body was buried in Westminster Abbey. Now, that's a part of the ritual, okay? But why was this fellow's heart removed in Israel? Nobody knows. It's a mystery. It is my humble opinion that the Mossad, the Israeli secret police, removed his heart to send a message back to the Knights Templar, telling the Knights Templars, you leave your hands off the Temple Mount. It's ours. Now, I cannot tell you for sure that's what they're trying to say, but that would be my summation of the reason why his heart was removed in Israel before his body was sent back to Scotland. You see, it's still going on after all these years. And the Israelis know that the Knights Templar want the Temple Mount. They know that. From the Knights Templar, of course, comes, in America we call it the Masonic Lodge. They claim to be the builders of Solomon's temple. They want to be involved in the erection of the next Solomon's temple, the third temple. So you can see the conflict that's going on. I want to take you back to a 13th century Jewish commentary. 700 years ago, a rabbi wrote, quote, at every 60 years of the 6th millennium, the Hay, which is the 5th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, standing for the breath of God, the Holy Spirit, will mount a stage higher. And after 600 years of the 6,000, that would be the Jewish calendar year 5600, corresponding to our calendar year 1840. The rabbis wrote, there will be opened the windows of heaven above and the fountains of wisdom below, and the world will make preparations to enter on the 7th thousand of the 7th millennium, as man makes preparations on the 6th day of the week when the sun is about to set. Now, this comes from a rabbinical commentary that each day of creation represents 1,000 years of human history, and that the 7th millennium is the great Sabbath. The 7th day in which God rested represents the 7th millennium, when the Messiah will rule over the earth in peace and utopia at last. So he says, this rabbi 700 years ago wrote that beginning around 1840, the world will begin to make preparations for the arrival of the 7th millennium. Well, if you'll think back to around the 1840s, there was an awakening among the Jews of Europe. Out of that came Theodor Herzl, who in 1897 had the first World Zionist Congress and predicted in 50 years the world will see the birth of the State of Israel, which came exactly 50 years later in 1948. So I cannot tell you that this is a prophecy, but I can tell you that it looks mighty suspicious. Somebody's in charge of bringing it to pass, it looks to me like. And then in the same chapter, in this 13th century commentary, comes these sentences. When the 60th year shall have passed over the threshold of the 6th millennium. Now, if you recall, the threshold was last year, the year 2000, 2001. We are on the threshold. And the year 5760 was the year 2000. So here we have the 60th year, 5760, crossing the threshold in the year 2000 of the 6th millennium into the 7th. And it says, God will visit the daughter of Jacob, that is the remnant of Israel, with a preliminary remembrance. Now, I cannot tell you what that preliminary remembrance is, only that it is preliminary and not a full remembrance. But it says then 6.5 years later, there will be a full remembrance. Is God opening the eyes of his people? Has God brought a veil over human history and is now beginning to lift that veil? Full remembrance. Next sentence. Then all nations shall combine together against the daughter of Jacob in order to drive her from the world. 700-year-old prophecy. Sounds like Armageddon, doesn't it? And then it says, and all the children of Israel will assemble in their various places until the completion of the century. And then shall they bring all your brethren out of all nations for an offering unto the Lord. That's been happening since 1948. Isaiah 66:20. And the children of Ishmael will at the same time rouse all the peoples of the world to come up to war against Jerusalem. Sounds like Armageddon, doesn't it? But the interesting thing is the children of Ishmael are doing that very thing as I speak. Then this 13th century commentary says, then the Vav, which is the 6th letter of the Hebrew alphabet standing for the Messiah, shall rouse itself to unite with the Hay, the Holy Spirit, and renew the souls that had become old. Now, we call that resurrection. So as to rejuvenate the world. Happy are those who will be left alive at the end of the 6th millennium to enter on the Sabbath, for that is the day set apart by the Holy One, the Messiah, on which to effect the union of souls, resurrection, and to call new souls to join those that are still on earth. 1,000 years utopia. Last year began the day of rage. The Palestinians began fighting. No peace, no compromise. Day of rage? Or is it introductory to the day of God's wrath? Are we there? Last year, September 29th, the year 2000, began Tishri 1 of the year 5761. Next month, September 18th, the new moon of September, begins 5762. Now, the interesting thing about next month is that will begin the next 7-year cycle in the Jewish calendar. We are now in the closing days of a sabbatical year. And next month, September 18th, begins the next 7-year cycle. Now, what is important to me about that is that Daniel chapter 9 tells about the 70 weeks. Those weeks are sabbatical cycles. And the 70th week, which most believe is the tribulation period, falls within the parameters of a 7-year cycle. Normally, according to Daniel 9:27, the tribulation period cannot begin just any time it wants to. It has to begin at the beginning of a 7-year cycle and go for 7 years. So next month would be an awfully good time to begin the tribulation period. Now, I'm not here to tell you that it will begin. I'm not a date setter in that regard. All I am here to do is to tell you that according to rabbinical teachings, those 7 years are a 7-year sabbatical cycle. Will we see a confirmation or a strengthening of a peace accord? Will we see United Nations troops in Jerusalem? I don't know. We're just a month away or so. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But this last year has been so fragile for Israel that Ehud Barak lost his prime ministership, lost it in an election to Ariel Sharon, the old warhorse himself, who, by the way, is an excellent individual to take Israel into the tribulation period. He's got the experience. The current conflict we see going on in Israel may be the prelude to the battle of Gog and Magog. We are told that by the Russian military that they believe war will begin sometime in the next 3 months. I cannot tell you it will. But last year, just prior to the outbreak of the latest intifada, Israel asked the United Nations to assume sovereignty over the Temple Mount, hoping that the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council will assume control over the site. And the 5 permanent members are Russia, feet of a bear; China, tail of a dragon; France, home of the Knights Templar; Great Britain, mouth of a lion; and the United States, wings of an eagle. Sounds like we just about got the makings of a beast. Amos predicted that the future sanctuary that the Jews would erect on the Temple Mount would be a tent, the tabernacle of David. Amos 9:11 and 12 says, "In that day I'll raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen and close up the breaches thereof. I'll raise up its ruins and build it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom and of all the heathen which are called by my name, saith the Lord that doeth this." Now I want you to notice a few things about this verse. The remnant of Edom. The word Edom here is spelled with the same Hebrew words as the word Adam. Okay? Instead of being the remnant of Edom, it could be the remnant of Adam. And of all the heathen, the word heathen here is goyim, the Gentiles. Of all the Gentiles which are called by my name. Do you know any Gentiles called by his name? Only since Pentecost. Only since Calvary is all. In fact, in Acts chapter 15, when there was a meeting in Jerusalem over Cornelius, the first Gentile convert, and there were some Jews there upset because all those Gentiles were getting saved without having to submit to the law of Moses. This passage was quoted. "After this I will return and build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down. I will build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up, that the remnant of Edom," no, this says the residue of Adam, the residue of men, "might seek after the Lord, and all the Gentiles upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord." And Cornelius was the first one. And we're the rest of them. An interesting verse. That in the end time, the tabernacle of David is going to be set up. So you see, there is an ongoing desire on the part of Orthodox Jews to restore temple worship. In 1984, the Temple Institute began to build the tools of the temple. They are not permanent fixtures, but for the most part, temporary fixtures for a tent. And of course, we'll be hearing from some of the men from Israel in a few days, and with bated breath, listening to what they have to say, because they've been trying to establish temple worship. The Temple Mount, that's where this whole situation is moving. And of course, the Arabs have been digging there. Here's the diggings you can see on the screen, using the Solomon stable area to build a new Muslim mosque that where 3,500 Muslims can come and pray. And they have had no regard for temple artifacts. They just took the dirt and dumped it out in the Kedron Valley. You can see some of the ruins here. They have no regard for the ruins of the ancient Temple Mount. You see, the Temple Mount was once the place of Solomon's temple. And where the Dome of the Rock is, it is believed that the Holy of Holies once stood there. The Ark of the Covenant once sat on that rock. In fact, if you look very closely, you'll see beneath the ark on the screen a rectangular indention on the Esakra, which is the same width and length as the Ark of the Covenant. And we are told that Solomon had a special place made for the ark. That indention you can see as you're looking south across the Esakra, the rock under the dome. And you can see the indented place, which is the same width and length as the Ark of the Covenant. That surely must have marked the spot of the Holy of Holies. But since a Muslim mosque stands there today, some rabbis have called it the abomination of desolation. And here's an outline of Herod's temple sitting imposed over where the Dome of the Rock is situated today, above the rock that once stood in the Holy of Holies. Ezekiel gives us what I think is the best description of the future temple site. He said in chapter 37, last couple of verses, "Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them. It shall be an everlasting covenant with them. I'll place them and multiply them and set my sanctuary in the midst of them forevermore. My tabernacle also shall be with them." There it is. Not a monument of sorts, but a tent. And then comes the battle of Gog and Magog. Following that will be 7 years burning the weapons, which I think conform to the 7-year cycle of the Sabbaths. And then we come to chapter 40, verse 1. "In the 25th year of our captivity, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month." Do you know what day that is? That's Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. 10 days after the new moon of September. So he tells us when he goes to Israel, to Jerusalem. Now watch. "In the visions of God brought he me into the land of Israel and set me upon a very high mountain, by which was as the frame of a city on the south." You see the excavations of Old Jerusalem beneath the southern wall of the Temple Mount? The frame of a city on the south. I submit to you, Ezekiel was watching modern day Israel. Taken 2,500 years into the future. Then it says he came to the gate which looks toward the east and went up the stairs. There's stairs behind that gate. Measured the threshold of the gate, which was 1 reed broad, about 10.5 feet. And the threshold of the other gate, there's 2 gates there, which was also 10.5 feet. He measured the porch of the gate, which was inward. Well, let's go to the gate. There's the stairs. Scripture says, came to the gate which looked toward the east, went up the stairs thereof. There's stairs behind the gate. And when I was there, I stepped off a little over 3 steps, measured the gate, which was 1 reed broad, about 10.5 feet. And then it says that he measured the threshold of the other gate. There are two gates there. And the other threshold of the gate, which was 1 reed broad. I submit to you, this is what Ezekiel saw. But you got to understand that this is not the gate that stood there in Ezekiel's day, nor even in the days of Jesus. This gate was built later. Then he measured the porch of the gate, 8 cubits, and the post thereof 2 cubits, and the porch of the gate was inward. You're seeing the inside. The porch of the gate is inward. And then he says there were little narrow windows to the little chambers, and their posts within the gate round about, and likewise to the arches round about inward. Chapter 40, verse 16. I submit to you, there's the long narrow window with the arched openings to the inside. But those were only built 500 years ago. Ezekiel saw them 2,500 years ago. And then he brought me to the temple and measured the posts thereof. This is the Jewish sanctuary, here called a temple. Measured the post, 6 cubits broad on one side, 6 cubits broad on the other side, which was the breadth of the tabernacle. So you see, when the Jews do gain access to this place to set up temple worship for the tribulation period, they'll set it up in a few hours. It'll be a tent. And he measured it by the 4 sides, had a wall round about 500 reeds long, 500 broad, to make a separation between the sanctuary and the profane place. You see, there is a profane place on that mountain, and the Jews are going to erect a wall to make a separation between the Jewish sanctuary and what the Bible calls a profane place. Do you see a profane place on that mountain? I do too. And then chapter 43, verse 2, he says, and behold, the glory of the God of Israel came from the way of the east. And his voice was like the noise of many waters, and the earth shined with his glory. What day is this? Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. Same day. And here comes Jesus. It's his second coming, in case you was wondering when he is coming back. And he said unto me, Son of man, the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet, where I will dwell in the midst of the children of Israel forever. And my holy name shall the house of Israel no more defile, in setting their threshold by my threshold, and their post by my post, and a wall between me and them. Then the Lord said unto me, talking about the eastern gate, which you see is closed. This gate shall be shut, God said. It shall not be opened. No man shall enter in by it, because the Lord, the God of Israel, hath entered in by it. Therefore it shall be shut. Now, they've tried to open that gate a couple of times, have never succeeded. I submit to you, it will never be opened. Now, I know I've heard preachers preach when I was a kid that one day the gate's going to be opened when the Lord comes. No, the Lord's already gone through that gate. The Bible says that when he enters into the porch, it'll be from the inside. And he'll have the Lord's Supper, and then when he leaves, he'll leave the same way he came in. I want you to know the dragon will not prevail. Jesus is coming back. And he's coming soon. Be ready for him. God bless. Thank you. Okay. Don't forget, what is it, tomorrow night? I hope. 6:30, is that right? Anyway, visit our book table till then, okay? God bless you. Thank you.
Well done, buddy. Well done.